What's up, Duval? It's your favorite Jag, Bucky Brooks, and this is Bleav in Jaguars, podcast dedicated to everything Jacksonville Jaguars. But today we're going to do a little crossover pod. Got one of my colleagues, one of my family members from the Bleav family, Mike Wobschall, who's going to host Bleav in Vikings. He does that on Mondays with Brian McKinney. He has a few other shows that he does solo, much like me. So this is fun because we're going to have an opportunity to talk about the game that's coming up, but maybe we can pick his brain to see what the Jaguars can do going forward to maybe be a consistent playoff contender like the Minnesota Vikings. But before we get into that, let's pay off our sponsor, Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game betting, live Bet Online provides you with all the action and ability to watch games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything football, NBA, college basketball, NHL to UFC and MMA, head to Bet Online today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online, the game starts here. And so, Mike, we're at it. We're rivals this weekend, but before we get to that, tell me a little about your podcast, what you're doing with the Vikings, how that's coming together for you.
Oh man, thanks, Bucky. It's fun to be doing this with you, especially since we did so many things together when I was with the Vikings and at the combine, or whether we were going to Culver City and seeing you there or whatever. So this is fun. Love being reconnected. Bleav in Vikings has been really fun. I just, it kind of started for me in August, and I had followed Bleav because, yourself, Bob Papa, and then Solomon Wilcots, three people who I was fortunate enough to sort of connect with, network with, and be close to when I was in the league as a member of the Vikings content team. You guys were all doing it, so I was following it. And then it worked out for me to join Bleav to do the Vikings podcast in August. And then, like you said, Brian McKinney and I do it on Mondays, so we call it BMAC Mondays. And he's got a cool perspective, especially this week, actually. And we'll talk about Cam Robinson because only 3 times since 2000 has a left tackle been traded one week and started for that team that Sunday. And BMAC was one of them. He did it when he went from the Ravens to the Dolphins. So he has great perspective on things. We do that every Monday. And then I try and do it myself a couple of days where I really try to break down the other team's personnel, especially those non-familiar opponents like the Jags are, where you only see them once every 4 years, because a lot of our fans aren't going to know who some of the guys are. So I try to get like real heavy and in depth. And then on a Friday, I like to predict and have fun and do stuff like this. So Bleav in Vikings has been really fun to do, and I hope to keep doing it and following your guys' footsteps. You guys did a great job of setting the table and setting the standard. So it's a ton of fun.
Well, man, that's great to hear. And it's funny that you brought up Cam Robinson, because there was some conversation internally about Cam Robinson and how all of a sudden he can go to Minnesota and he looks a little different in that thing. And I've talked about standards and expectations and those things. But let's start there, because the injury to Christian Darrisaw was devastating to a point, because you talk about a team that has real Super Bowl aspirations and a path to get to the Super Bowl. Yes, the division is tough with Detroit and Green Bay and Chicago, but the Minnesota Vikings had jumped out to a great start. They're playing well on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. And so you lose a young, promising left tackle and you replace him with Cam Robinson. What did you see from Cam when he jumped in and kind of got baptized right away?
I was so impressed with what he did. Left tackle, I mean, you and DJ talk about it a lot when you're scouting players, and telling us who's coming up and who's going to be good. I mean, I guess, if I could like make a list of players the Vikings don't want to lose, I mean, I would say Darrisaw is up there, like one of the 3. Jefferson, Darrisaw, and the quarterback, whoever he is that year, I mean, so that was a big bummer and a low point, because they lost the game. They lost Darrisaw. It was their second loss in a row. And so it was a low point. Cam Robinson comes in and he's going to get more and more accustomed and in tune with what they're doing. So they probably weren't able to do many of the creative or exotic things you might do with an offensive line. There probably weren't many unbalanced looks, or they probably didn't get him out in space and move him around. They'll get to that. But just on a one-on-one level, I thought he came in and a great accounting of himself against the Colts. And he's going to be challenged a little bit more this week with the duo that the Jags have at edge rusher. But sometimes, I mean, this, Bucky, you've been in the business. Sometimes you just go someplace new and it gives you a little jolt. and you feel like you're with some people who believe in you or have some optimism with you. So maybe that was a part of it for Cam, but I just have a lot of respect for what he did on a professional level to come to a new team and in 4 days become a starter and play that well. I thought it was really impressive and a big uplifting moment for the Vikings.
Yeah, no, I would say my observation is people rise up to the level of standards and expectations that they're given.
Mm-hmm.
And so you leave a disappointing situation in Jacksonville where you're sitting at 2-6. You're losing. The playoffs don't look like their reality. And then you jump into a Minnesota Vikings team who is playing for something completely different. They're talking about winning the division. I'm sure internally they're talking about how can we get to the number 1 seed in the NFC. All those things are in play. And as a player, when that's the expectation, it's easy for you to give a little more because you know that you're playing for something even bigger than yourself. I think this week will be interesting for Cam because people will say he has mixed emotions. No, they won't be mixed. It's a very personal thing for him coming back. As a player, I remember being released or waived or traded away, however you want to phrase it. But when you leave one team and go to another team and you go back to see the original team, it won't take much to get him going. And because he is familiar with the matchups, you talk about Josh Hines, Allen, and Trayvon Walker, he's going to know the tricks of the trade. He knows what they like to do. And we can say, they know him too. But I think it's a little different when the offensive tackle has a book on the players that he's going against. And look, I expect Kevin O'Connell to leave him on the island some. He may help him a little bit. But no, Cam is a big boy. Cam has played well against big-time players, and I would think that he's going to play well on Sunday.
Yeah, and so that was part of it too, Bucky, because when the injury happened to Darrisaw, there was a big question in Vikings Nation, like, what do we do? Because there's a number of different ways you can go, right? You can next man up, who's the number 2 left tackle? That's an option. Blake Brandel, their left guard, has some versatility to him. So there was a thought about moving him from left guard to left tackle, and then you put Dalton Reisner in there at left guard. The trade market, the street, you can go find a guy in the street. So there's a lot of different ways they could go. And I love the way they decided to go because when you start sliding guys around, left guard to left tackle, number 2 left guard comes in.
Yeah.
Now you're kind of messing up multiple. You had a mess already at left tackle and not even your own fault. It was an injury, but now you're messing up other spots too. So I thought it was a good solution that the Vikings came to. I thought the second best thing they could have done was put a young player in there. They drafted Michael Rouse, and I don't remember what you thought of him. He might not be ready to go, but I think this was a pretty optimal outcome for the Vikings in terms of like a philosophical solution. Do we go trade for a guy that we know we can put in there? Do we get a young guy in there? Do we slide everyone around? I like the way they ended up going.
Yeah, I mean, look, you brought up a really good point when people talk about, we can just move this person around and that person around. And with the offensive line, it's different than any other position in the thing. Even though they're individual spots, they really are 5 people operating as one. And when you begin to change and move around the furniture, it changes the composition of the room. By being able to plug Cam Robinson at left tackle and keep everyone the same, yes, it takes him a while to catch up to speed, but everybody else is very comfortable with their neighbors. With Cam, he's like, okay, hi, neighbor, we can figure you out. We can get there working. To me, it was a sensible solution also because Cam Robinson last year of his deal, it makes it very, I would say, cut and dried where you're getting a motivated player who is coming to a thing with something to prove, not only to Minnesota, like, hey, maybe I can go there and press and stay, or I can set myself up because if I help us win, we win and go to the postseason where those games are must-see TV. Maybe I kind of spark interest as a free agent that may not have been there if I just kind of stayed in Jacksonville.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I think you're totally right about when you get injected into a competitive situation coming from a place where maybe hope was dwindling. That absolutely is an upper for a player, right? What I know that you're not going to want to sit here and denigrate a player, but what were the challenges with Cam that led to maybe them being okay with letting him go in a trade like that?
Like sometimes, and I would say this because I won't denigrate a player. I think he was a really good player. I would say what he had that they may lack or the Jags may come to lack is the edginess that he brought, right? Like Cam is one of those. He didn't mind mixing it up. He didn't mind, as the young people say, he was okay with the smoke coming his way. And you lose some of that when you let him out the building. There was some intrigue about the player that was playing behind him and Walker Little. How good would he be? Walker Little's an impending free agent. Is he good enough to play? And so the injury created a situation where Walker Little had an opportunity to play. He played well in that game. And I just think, like with Cam, and I think Cam would probably admit this, he might not have been at the most focused that he's been in his career this season. And I think sometimes when you have a trade and when you have whatever took place with Cam and the coaches and them being traded, you have a motivated player who wants to do that. And the hardest thing to do in pro sports is to keep players motivated, to keep poking the bear to get them to play at their best. Well, in Minnesota, you're seeing the best version of Cam because I think you're seeing a motivated version of Cam who will continue to be motivated because like the money's out there for him, but winning is out there. And I think winning has a lot to do with the moods of players. And when you haven't won a lot in Jacksonville, man, it can be tough. It can be tough because remember, he has absorbed a lot of losing. So going to a new environment where winning is the expectation and consistently the outcome just makes you feel different and play different. Because remember, he played at Alabama. He is used to high levels of success. That's kind of a part of who he is and what he's about. And so I think he goes back to an environment that is probably more like that than what it was.
Interesting. We had a wide receiver coach in Minnesota when I was there, Bucky, named George Stewart.
Oh, yeah. I know George. I know George really well.
Yeah. So he was awesome. He was really gracious with his time. And one thing I talked to him about, I had a conversation with him one time and actually my question to him that led to this was, I was talking about wide receivers with him because he was our wide receivers coach. And I was gently getting at why are wide receivers, why do they tend to be divas, for lack of a better term? And he's like, well, they're the one position on the field that is totally relying on others to have success. They get insecure. But then we got into a conversation about, as a coach, especially a position coach, you need to know what motivates each individual guy. Some guys want to go to the Hall of Fame and they want their name up in the Ring of Honor. Some guys want to get paid. Some guys want a championship ring, right? Some guys are prideful about the name on their jersey and their family. And so you talking about Cam in this way reminds me of that conversation with George, where it's like, as a coach, you got to know how your guy is wired, and everyone's wired differently,
Yeah, they all are wired differently. And the challenge that you have as a pro coach, and it would allow us to expand our conversation to Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores, is as a coach, you have to take all of these individuals who have their own separate agendas, but you have to get them to understand that if you buy into the team agenda first, your individual agenda will be satisfied. It's something that is frequently said, but it's really, really hard to do. And when I look at Minnesota, it appears that they've done that. Just when you look at the players that have had, like, let's just talk about Justin Jefferson. Won a contract, took a while for him to get paid. How is that going to work out? Shows up extremely motivated after he gets the deal, continues to be the same guy that we saw before he got paid. And this offense, look, he's the straw that stirs the offense. And Kevin O'Connell always supported him throughout the contract stuff, never said anything disparaging, said it's going to play out. But he always was positive and supportive whenever he stood in front of the mic and talked about him. To me, that is a skill that great head coaches have, to be able to look like they're always about the player, even though they have to toe that line between team and player when it comes to allegiance.
Great point. I mean, I wasn't in the building with Kevin. I left before he came there, but no one said anything but positive things to me about Kevin. All my buddies still in the building. But it's just funny because Leslie Frazier was the coach before Mike Zimmer in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Amazing man.
Yeah.
He was Brad Childress' defensive coordinator. Brad gets fired. Leslie's interim head coach, then gets named head coach. Defensive-minded head coach, but a really nice guy, soft-spoken, but firm with his convictions, but a nice guy. And then that didn't work out. And you always see this in the league. The next coach is the opposite. Right? So now Zim comes in and you got the hard knocks, the cuss words, like all that stuff, right? And you got to straighten this thing out. And then, then that sort of flames out. And now you got O'Connell in there, who's the nice guy and talks to the players a certain way. And I remember when Adrian was going through the last year or so in Minnesota and the contract thing, and Zim was like, Adrian's playing for us or nobody this year, right? And that's you juxtapose that with how Kevin O'Connell has handled the Justin Jefferson situation. And Zim is one of my guys and my friends, so I'm not criticizing how he did the Adrian thing, But that's what needed to be said at that point in time, and that's how Zim chose to handle it. And Kevin is handling it a different way and trying to toe that line between the company line and engaging with the players. And I think that's a new school thing in the league. I think the players are commanding that and desiring that at a higher rate than maybe they used to.
Yeah, there's some of that. And I still believe that you can be firm and even old school with players. But I think what you have to do is, one, you have to have a relationship with them, and you have to be honest with them at all times about what it is. They may not like it. They may bristle at it. But if they know that you care about them and they know that you're consistent with your messaging, they can buy in. It's funny that you talked about like the stark contrast between Zimmer and Kevin O'Connell in terms of their personalities and their positive approaches and those things. But I would say what Kevin O'Connell did, and I appreciate how he recognized it right after his first year. It wasn't going well with Donatil, made a move, and then he comes right back and he gets Brian Flores. And one of the things that you have to have on your staff is, when I talk about diversity, I'm not talking about racial diversity. I'm talking about personality diversity in terms of, hey, you got to have some positive Patties, you got to have some negative Nancys, and you got to blend it all together so the team goes, because certain guys need a pat in the back, other guys need a kick in the butt to get them going. And you have to have enough kind of different personalities on your coaching staff to be able to handle that. So when he brings in Brian Flores, who I think is a nice guy, I've talked to him, I really like him, I really respect his mind, and I believe he's certainly a head coach. But what Kevin was able to do is, sometimes you got to have a little bit of that edginess that he may not project, but Brian Flores certainly projects it, because when you see him and around him, you see how that defense plays, they got a bit of an edge to him. And so talk a little bit about what the Vikings are with Brian Flores as the head of the defense.
I think what you're seeing with Brian Flores right now, Bucky, so Brian came in and his first season was last season. And he obviously has a very well-established and successful way of doing things, but you can't fully implement that. Well, you can fully implement it, but you can't enjoy the fruits of that labor until you have the players who can do what you're asking to be done, right? And so I think this year, Brian finally has basically a full complement of those guys. I mean, you take a job your first year as a coach, no matter if it's a head coach, coordinator, yes, you can get some influence in there and get some new blood in there. That's what you want, but you can't fix everything. You can't address everything in one off season. There's just too many positions. There's salary cap restrictions. There's just guys you got to live with. And I think year 2 here with Flo, you're really seeing like this. Basically every guy who's playing is a Brian Flores approved player, right? I mean, he's had 2 off seasons to work with the scouting staff to get guys in and out. And so Harrison Smith, holdover, a guy that they wanted to keep, obviously. But other than that, there's just a lot of change, and you're getting Flores type of guys. To me, the predominant characteristic I see when I just watch games on TV, Bucky, and then watch them back, I see it would be hard, I think, as an offensive coach to identify patterns and predictability. I just don't think there's much of that with him. And sometimes it's not executed well and someone takes advantage of the Vikings defense. But I think the one thing they are not is predictable on defense. I think he mixes things up and it's hard to know who's coming and where are they coming from.
When I look at them, I think they are what we call a high IQ defense. I don't think it's a coincidence that they have a lot of look, it's intentional that they have a lot of veterans on that defense. They have a lot of what I would call smart players on that defense, which enables them to do a bunch of different things. So when you talk about changing the picture and the look and watching these guys do these, I would say these crazy pre-snap disguises to then being somewhere else post-snap, it takes an experienced player to understand, okay, I have to get to the post. I know I'm at the line of scrimmage, but how am I going to get from the line of scrimmage to the post without the ball being thrown over my head? And they have a number of those guys that understand how to do it and fill it in. And this was the rage of the league a few years ago where people talked about positionless football, meaning that the Golden State Warriors had kind of coined the phrase in basketball where, hey, man, we got a bunch of 6'7" guys that can kind of play all over the court, and you just don't know what it is because we don't label them. Well, the Vikings have some of that in terms of their DBs, corners, and safeties are kind of blurred and blended together. You have Van Ginkel, who is kind of an edge rusher, but kind of a linebacker in where they line up. And it all plays into the masterful pre-snap disguising and bluff and blitz tactics that Brian Flores employs. And because they're older, experienced, they have an expertise in their position and maybe another position, it really allows the Vikings to do so much and present so many different looks to the opposing quarterback.
That's a great breakdown of it, and I love the tag there, high IQ defense, and I guess them being so veteran is a big part of that. And it's not that young players can't be high IQ players. They can be, but when you're a high IQ player plus you have experience and you know where some bones are buried in different offenses, that's a great combination, and that's what they have. I mean, Harrison Smith, Andrew Van Ginkel, Stephon Gilmore. I mean, these are guys who it's
great
hard.
Beers. Yeah, great beard.
You can out jump them, outrun them. You can be quicker than them, but you're not surprising those guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. All right, so we talked about high IQ. We talked about I would say maybe the Brian Flores reclamation project that he has been on the sideline. But there's another project that has, I guess, kind of been turned around successfully in Minnesota, and that's Sam Darnold. How surprised are you and Minnesota fans to see a guy who's bounced around a little bit after being the number 3 overall pick in the draft emerge as a top playmaker and passer in Minnesota?
I'm a little ashamed that I wasn't more optimistic about his chances of being this good, honestly. And the reason is I saw him at USC just like you did when he came out. And I saw a guy with great feet, athleticism, could move around, throw on the run, and I loved it. And then I saw those expectations mount, him go to New York and it not pan out, and then go to Carolina and it doesn't pan out. And so I think I got stuck there in a headspace there on Sam. What I should have seen, I think, Bucky, is I should have remembered what we all saw from him at USC when he was coming out, which was impressive. And then you get a guy like Kyle Shanahan, who last season, obviously the Niners had high expectations. Kyle was like, yeah, I'll take Sam to be one play away from leading my team this year. I mean, that's what Kyle said. And so for someone like Kyle to have that kind of confidence in him should have opened my eyes to the fact that here in Minnesota, Sam's got a chance to be good, because I was in line with everyone else who took a look at the Vikings and identified them as a great landing spot for a quarterback in last year's draft. Why? Well, they have 2 great offensive tackles. They have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. They just signed Aaron Jones. Like, there's just an infrastructure there, a quarterback-friendly, offensive-minded head coach. So those same reasons that made Minnesota a good spot for Sam Darnold or for Drake May or for whoever they ended up taking, it stands to reason it'd be a good place for someone like Sam, who a lot of people think has all the tools to be good, just hasn't been in a good environment. So I definitely missed the boat on this one, but I've enjoyed seeing him have success. I do think there are times, Bucky, and maybe you haven't seen this, or maybe if you go back, you would see this. I think he misses some opportunities for explosive plays and then instead checks it down to a safer throw. And so you don't see an incompletion or a low completion percentage. You don't see picks. You don't necessarily see sacks. So you might be blind to it. But if you go back and watch it, you see Addison on a double move, open down the field, but he checked it down to Jones. Or you might see a 4th down incompletion to Jefferson in triple coverage, and you didn't see Addison open in the bottom of the screen. And so I think he misses some of those, and O'Connell sees that, but I don't. But total picture-wise, I'm impressed with him, and I'm happy that he's having the success he's having.
Yeah, it's really an interesting phenomenon to kind of see him kind of play the way he's playing. Looking at his passer rating, he's at 107.8. That is significantly higher than at any other time in his career. The best was at Carolina when he was at 92.6. He's completing almost 70% of his passes. Touchdown interception ratio is 17-7. And the reason why I kind of want to bring it up is just because there's not this thing with Trevor Lawrence, but there's this When Trevor Lawrence got paid in the offseason, there were people that were saying he got paid before he proved that he was a $50 million quarterback. And the pushback or the way that you defend Trevor is like, hey, man, it's all of the things around the quarterback that make it go. It's the 3 Ps. It's the play caller, the playmakers, and the pass protectors that make it happen. And when I look at Sam Darnold and I look at the success that he is having, okay, we talk about Kevin O'Connell. Kevin O'Connell is regarded as one of the best play callers in football. You look at the weapons that they have around them, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, pair of number 1 picks that are playing at the level that they were drafted. TJ Hawkinson will return to the lineup. He's just coming back. He's another first-round pick who was brought over to give them something. They go and get Aaron Jones behind them, that offensive line you talk about with Darisaw. Like all of a sudden now, Sam Darnold is playing with a collection of players around him that allow him just to play like a pass-first point guard. And even though we may not regard him as a top 5 player, it looks a lot different when the pieces around you are at a high level. As you look to J.J. McCarthy and as the Vikings look for quarterbacks or whatever, would you expect J.J. McCarthy to have similar success because the pieces around the quarterback are now so much better than what had been there, that they're just a really good team? And if you get the right quarterback, you can plug and play no matter who's driving the car.
Yeah, it's going to be so interesting to see that. I don't have a reason to doubt that McCarthy is going to be good in this system. I think Kevin O'Connell is very in tune with what he wants to do and who can do it and who can't. Truthfully, I'd say they probably really liked Drake May and would have taken him if they could have gotten up to number 3. Yeah. But I think they were very happy to take J.J. McCarthy, and I think they view him as someone they can really mold and shape even more than maybe a Drake May because he's a little younger. So I expect McCarthy to be the answer for Minnesota. This whole thing's designed to have a rookie scale contract in there and a rookie be the guy, and then you bulk up around him with big contracts at both tackles, big contracts at receiver, big contracts at 2 edge rushers. I mean, this is like the old Russell Wilson Seattle Seahawks thing, right? Where they were really able to build up around him because they had Russ on a rookie contract. So, and more so than just like my pure analysis of J.J. McCarthy, the reason I'm bullish on him is my respect and confidence in Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's vision. I think that they are sharp in what their vision is for young players. So I just have a belief in it from that standpoint too.
Now, it's funny that you brought up that relationship between head coach and GM. There have been people that have asked me, why has Minnesota been so successful for so long, over decades? You know, we could talk about Rick Spielman and the tenure that he had, and even though it ended, however it ended, like there still was a lot of success there. You now talk about Kwesi taking over and those things. What is it about the building, the organization, the whatever, like that allows that team, that franchise, to always be in the conversation when it comes to being in playoff contention?
I think back to one. You know how in the war room at team facilities they'll mic the coach and GMs up. So there was one where I think the year they drafted Jordan Addison, I think they were trying to move out of that pick, and they just couldn't quite get the right deal, and they ended up standing pat and taking Jordan Addison. And there was a moment between Kevin and Kwesi where Kevin was like really happy and like trust me, I told you we'd get him. Like Kevin just was really happy to have him. And I think Kwesi knows what he knows what his value adds are, and he knows what Kevin's are, and they don't step on each other's toes. And I think he truly listens to the coaches and is like, these are the types of players they want. Maybe my eval doesn't really fall in line with that, but this is what Flo wants. Yeah. This is what Kevin wants. We're going to stay here and take this guy. So I think that relationship is happening. Now, you've been in the middle of these dynamics. That might be like a honeymoon phase. Like maybe Rick, Spielman, and Zim were like that too at one point. But then you kind of live with each other for a while and we get at each other's throats. But for the time being, I think there's that symbiotic harmony between these two where they're each doing their own things and they're doing them at a high level.
All right, so let's talk about the game on Sunday. Yeah. Look, Vikings come in. They look like they are one of those teams that could be one of the teams, last team standing. You talk about the Detroit Lions and the Minnesota Vikings are right there, the Commanders. Meanwhile, the Jaguars are kind of limping into this game. They're struggling. Like, this is kind of like the last hurrah. If they're going to be able to do it, it's Custer's last stand. So what are you expecting? Like, coming from a Vikings thing, what about facing the Jaguars would give you a little angst and anxiety?
Two things. Definitely those two edge rushers, those two ends. I mean, those guys are problems. And I think it's hard to bootleg out. Like, I think it's hard to have Darnold bootleg out, reduce the field by half, and attack with a levels concept. Like, that would be a great thing for Sam to do, but I don't think you can really do that against these edge rushers. I think you're challenger. I think you got to try to block them up, set up the pocket, stand in there, and go vertical. So if they can't block that up, I think there's big problems for the Vikings. So Hines Allen and Trayvon Walker definitely are like, we got to watch that. I guess there's three. The other one, the last one I'll get to and talk more about. The second one would be the two backs, Bigsby and Etienne. I really think that, like, when healthy, that's a great tandem. Bigsby is hard to bring to the ground. He gets a lot of yards after contact. I don't think there's a tell. Like, if Bigsby's in, they're running. If Etienne's in, they're pat. I don't think there's any of that going on. So if those two make it through the week of practice and play, there are potential problems there. But the one thing I really can't wait to watch is with Hockenson back is in rundowns, 1st and 10, 2nd and medium or short, 3rd and short rundowns, and the Vikings go 12 or 22. What's Jacksonville going to do? Are they going to go base against that, or are they going to do sub package against that? Because if I'm Kevin O'Connell, I'm going 12 personnel and I'm giving Darnold a run and a pass play. If the Jags are in base against us, can it to the pass, and let's get Hockenson out in a route with some linebackers. If the Jags are in base and we're in 12 or 22, make sure we're in the run play and we're going to run into the sub package with Jones. So I'm excited to watch that unfold. And Ryan Nielsen's the coordinator in Jacksonville, and I'm very curious what his plan will be for that, because I know Hockenson was back last week, but now he's really into it. He had 4 targets last week, 3 catches. He's healthy. He's good to go. He got a week under his belt. So this is a rest of the season thing for Vikings opponents is in 12 and 22, are you coming out with base or sub? And I can't wait to see what Jacksonville does there.
Hey, look, it's problematic, man. The last team that really challenged him in that way was the Buffalo Bills on a Monday night, and it did not go well. A lot of 12 personnel, a lot of unique packages and formations from a heavy set. So you got your base on the field and you're able to kind of dictate the terms. It creates a lot of problems. And if the Vikings elect to go that route, it will also be problematic just because of the matchups between the interior triangle. I would say the slot receiver, tight end, and running backs versus the Jaguars linebackers. That has not bode well for the Jaguars. And so it'd be interesting to see what they do in that regard. So final thing, as it relates to the Vikings and the defense and coming on, if the Jaguars, because it sounded like Mac Jones might get the start over Trevor Lawrence, what is Mac Jones up against in this defense if he gets his first start with the Jags against the Vikings?
Well, I think a big plus for Mac is his head coach. Like, I feel like Coach Peterson is really going to be in tune with the challenge that Mac has to come in here and be the quarterback. I mean, Doug was in Mac's position. Like, he knows what the challenge is here, as opposed to if you had, we all love Todd Bowles and Mike Zimmer, but if you're the head coach and you're defensive minded and you've got influence over what's going on and your backup quarterback is playing, I just think that's a more pressure packed situation for the backup. So I like the environment Mac has. I like Brian Thomas. I like the 2 tight ends. I like the 2 backs. So I think the opportunity is there for Mac. So what's he up against? We talked about it. He's up against a high IQ defense who is going to be very well aware of what the plan is and what the assignments are. So I don't think Mac is going to have any layups, busted coverages, clean pockets for 4.5 seconds. I don't think he's going to have any of that. So to me, I think Mac needs to go in there and just be really decisive and be quick. And truthfully, I would try to get the ball into the pass catcher's hands and make the Vikings tackle. I'm not saying they can't tackle. I'm saying I think you got a better chance of getting the ball out early and making people miss than you do of getting over the top on the Vikings. So I think it's boom, 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 boom. I think it's fast, quick, short. I think
ball
it's
out. Yeah, ball
that's
out.
what I think. And like, I get it. You always want the ball out quick, but sometimes you have the intention to get over the top, right? 7-step drops, play action, long developing plays. I know Doug's got a collection of those long developing plays. I wouldn't use them in this one. I think I'd go ball out really quick. I don't know.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough matchup, man. It's not one that is I'm not envious of the coaches in terms of trying to prep for this one. It is one where the Minnesota Vikings are playing well. They're playing well. Offense, defense, they can give you a lot of problems a bunch of different ways. And so we have to see what it looks like when it plays out Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern at the Bank. Mike, this is great, man. Thanks so much for having me on. And hopefully in the future, I can repay the favor.
Oh, I would love it. I would love to have you on. You bet, man. In season, draft season, free agency, the whole thing, man. I'd love to have you on. We'll definitely do that. I had a ton of fun today. So,
all right, man. Thanks so much. That is Bleav in Jaguars. Make sure you check out more episodes and check out my man's Bleav in Vikings. Support the fam. When we got it going, we want everyone to be rocking. So until next time, I'm Bucky Brooks. We'll talk to you soon.